Hi, I'm Chris Chappell, and this is Canada Uncensored. No, it's not. This is fucking art talk. Like, duh. All right. Uh, After that emotional uh, monologue to my friends and family that are in service to other people, and for the love of women, honestly, and so I'm going to talk about Renoir and why I love Renoir so much, and why he's an influence on my art. I gave up a contract today because there wasn't enough support. There just wasn't enough support. No amount of money is going to compensate for the loss of potential for me to have a relationship, because I'm my own worst enemy. I'm professional to a fault, or at least I'm trying. And like, then the fact that a lot of women are just not that smart. Sorry. And propaganda, as I've said before in many other videos, it affects women and children first. Now, Renoir here, an obvious lady killer, He, a lot of his subjects are women. And, artists and women, artists and whores like Van Gogh and Gauguin, it's an obvious association because of, artists like to hang out and be degenerates, frankly, to see the true grit and the seedy, dirty underbelly of society and of humanity. If I'm going to reference David Lynch there. Renoir was born February 25th, 1841. In Limoges, one of 5 sons of a poor tailor. Interesting, I'm wearing a suit. A suit made by slaves. Globalism is a failure. When he was 4, the family moved to Paris. At the age of 13, Renoir was sent to work as an apprentice in a porcelain factory where he kept busy decorating china. In his spare time, however, he would visit the Louvre and sketch the works of art, in particular antique sculpture. It was not long before he came to the conclusion that he wanted to be a fully fledged artist. I went through the same process. In high school, we went to the AGO. I went to the National Gallery of Canada. I've been to many other galleries across this country to visit and to learn something from other classical artists or influencers of the past. These titans, these giants, upon the shoulders which I stand. But since there was no money in the family, Renoir was obliged to take on all sorts of odd jobs. Same with me. Such as the decoration of window blinds so as to accumulate the necessary funds. The difference between Renoir and myself is that I just got tired of being treated like a dirty rag. You know, underpaid, underappreciated, and untouchable, unseen by the society at large. Finally, in 1862, Renoir was in a position to enroll at the École des Beaux-Arts. He also studied under Guillier, an academic artist whose rigid orthodox views irked him as much as they did his fellow pupils. Monet, Sisley, and Basile, with all whom he quickly became friends. During the 1860s, Renoir exhibited at the official salon in 1864, 1865, 1868, and 1870. But these showings brought him no financial rewards, and he was to remain until the end of the 1870s as poverty-stricken as Monet and Camille Pissarro. Until the late 1860s, Renoir was greatly influenced by the work of Courbet, adopting his dark palette with its blacks, grays, and browns. His technique of applying paint with the palette knife, for example, the painters of La Cour, in the forest of Fontainebleau, 1866, Sao Paulo Museum in Brazil. That's at the time of this writing, of course, in the late 70s. And even his rather heavy, earthy type of female nude, for example, La Baigneuse au Griffon, shown at the Salon of 1870 and now at the Sao Paulo Museum. But in the final years of the decade, he was moved towards a full Impressionist style. Renoir had been painting out of doors since 1865 at the least, and in 1869 was with Monet at Bougival on La Seine. La Grenouillerie was painted during this trip, and it reveals the influence of Monet in the lighter and brighter color scale, in the free brush work, and in the conception and concentration on rendering an impression of forms as they appear in sunlight. Renoir served in the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, but returned to Paris the following year during the Commune. Throughout the 1870s, he continued to work in the Impressionist idiom, producing what are, without a doubt, some of the most enchanting pictures in the history of European art. And from 1874 to 1879, and again in 1882, Renoir exhibited at the group show the Impressionists themselves organized. He gained his first important commercial success when the large, very carefully painted portrait of Madame Charpentier and her children was shown at the exhibit of La Vie Moderne, organized by M. Carpenter, in 1879. The same year, Renoir met at the Carpenters Paul Bernard, a government official who was to become a generous patron. But if the late 1870s brought Renoir his first taste of real success, they were also at the beginning of a period of crisis in the life as an artist. He became restless and began to travel. In 1881, he visited Algiers and Guernsey, and in the autumn, Italy. The frescoes of Raphael and the Pompeian murals that he saw there definitely had confirmed that Renoir had begun to feel about his own art, that it was becoming too amorphous in character and was weak in design. About 1883, he later told the dealer Vollard, a kind of break occurred in my work. I had wrung Impressionism dry and had come to the conclusion that I knew neither how to paint nor how to draw. During the 1880s, Renoir made a conscious attempt to remodel his style. His aim was to combine the linear precision of Ingres, whose work he had always admired, with the richness of color that he had favored in the 1870s. The key picture of this not altogether happy phrase is The Bathers, on which he worked from 1884 to 1887, for which he made many careful preparatory drawings. 3 years on one painting. 3 fucking years. In 1883, Renoir had a successful one-man show at Duran Ruel Paris Gallery. In 1892, he received the first token of official recognition when one of his canvases was purchased by the state. Although marred by poverty in youth and by ill health in old age, Renoir's life, from the domestic point of view, an extremely happy one. His eldest son, Pierre, had been born in 1885. In 1893, his wife gave birth to the second son, Jean, who was to become a celebrated film director. It was in the late 1880s that Renoir's health began to deteriorate. He suffered increasingly from arthritis, which became really serious after an accident in 1897, when he fell off a bicycle at Soyez. In 1907, he settled for good in the south of France at Cagnes-sur-Mer, an idyllic spot he had first discovered in 1899. By 1908, his arthritis had become so bad that he could only walk with the aid of sticks. In 1912, he had an unsuccessful operation and subsequently only paint seated in a bath chair. Holding a paintbrush had become exceedingly difficult. Partial atrophy of a nerve in the left eye made the act of painting harder still for him in old age. But Renoir would not be beaten. In 1908, he had modeled with his own hands 2 sculptures of his youngest son, Claude, and in 1901, and known as Coco. In 1913, he took up sculpture again. Only this time, he could do no more than dictate and supervise forms created by assistants, notably Gugliano, an ex-pupil Malinois, Maillol, whose work Renoir greatly admired. Renoir died at his Cagnes home, Les Colettes, on December 3rd, 1919. Although he continued to produce landscapes and flower pieces in still life, Renoir began to concentrate in the 1890s on single figures, invariably female, often nude or lightly draped, which he would always paint direct from a model. His favorite was Gabrielle, who had entered his household as a maid in 1893. Renoir's stylistic experiments of the 1880s gave way, in that following decade, to an idiom that he was once more rich and painterly. He abandoned severity of line, but his attempts to master a form of classical drawing stamped his later figures with a monumentality and grandeur not to be found in his earlier wholly impressionist phase. Renoir is probably the most popular of all late 19th century French painters, but he was far from being the most influential. He was not, and did not wish to be, in any way, a revolutionary artist. After the 1870s, he withdrew into a splendid world of his own imagination, and after 1900, there is virtually no development in his style. Even though he lived until 1919, his entire oeuvre, and it is vast, belongs to the 19th century. Unlike Cézanne, Gauguin, Seurat, or Monet, Renoir was to play no vital part in the evolution of modern art. My own form of madness has been to spend my whole life putting color on canvas. The nymph in the sands. I like this one at the Inn of Mother Anthony. And, I was just looking at and I posted in honor of James Bartleman, just passed as of recently within the recording of this video. He was a Lieutenant Governor General of Ontario. And That's my unit commendation up there from cadets. You know, I remember the meeting afterwards of the sunset ceremony, and it was an officer and an alumni that was at Seneca or something like that, taking animation. And at that point in time, I was so determined to be a pilot. I was like, screw this fucking bullshit. I'm not going to go do that. You know, what do you want me to do that for? You guys keep getting in my way. You're not appreciating me for my efforts and my dedication. You want to show me what I'm supposed to be instead. You know, this rebellious nature that I hold dear. This rude independence. This confidence that, you know, eventually had been eroded over the years by institutions, by women. And society at large, you know, just this resignation, you know, what if no one's going to give a shit, fine by me, I'll just self-destruct and let's see what happens. Let's see if I can kill myself by the time I'm 27. Let's see how much I can do by the age of 27. And if no one remembers me after the fact, whatever. Go down in a blaze of glory. But obviously, you survive that. You survive those sentiments, and you kind of move on, but not really, because in the face of reality, to be such an intelligent person is of such internal turmoil and conflict, in the face of, you know, the leviathan of human stupidity. Like, how are you supposed to fight that when everything and everyone doesn't want to see you succeed? I stopped expressing myself, and I stopped giving a shit, and I poured myself into my art. Becoming cold and withdrawn to everyone and everything. Combative, angry, and aggressive. It didn't matter how good I was when I started. No one wants to help you when you start unless you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth. And then people want something from you because you have so much. Sailboats at Argentilia. Again, I encourage you to stop this video at some point and look up Renoir's paintings. Là-bas au moulin de la Galette. Like these, you know, I would love to see these in person one day. I go to the Louvre, you know, go to the British Museum of Modern Art, and go to the MoMA. And go to Italy and Germany and appreciate these things for what they are. You know, I just lost motivation over the years. And you fall into this pit of despair. Because in the face of digital reality, this means nothing to a lot of people. It doesn't matter how many years it took him to make it. Why should I give a shit about history? Why should I give a shit about art? If all we want to do is destroy. If all we want to do is domination. Madame Claude Monet lying on a sofa. You know, again, all these forms, these concerns about color and emotion, and this is the huge difference between mediocrity in art and excellence. The swing. Madame Henriot. Like, he really captures her personality. She seems like such a sweet woman. You know, the expression on her face, and there's no lie about her womanhood. Renoir painted several portraits of this charming actress, who was a member of the Comédie Française. A good friend of the painter, she also commissioned studies of other members of her family. She died tragically in a theater fire despite Renoir's attempts to save her. There is no stylization here, but rather a direct, simple portrayal. Renoir emphasized the actress's dreamy expression. Luminous eyes, soft dark hair, and porcelain complexion. Subordinating the rest of the composition to her face, he barely indicates her breasts, arms, and hands with light dabs of opalescent color, and her bodice with delicate whites, tinted blues, and pinks. The pastel shades blended into the background contribute to the subtle aura surrounding the model. Renoir drew very little of this canvas, instead laying on the paint in thin, transparent washes. By such delicate means, the artist sensitively contrasts Meme Henriot's fragility with her warm individuality. This is typical of the intuitive rendering of a personality achieved by Renoir in his best portraits. Fine by me. Now the bathers, this is what I like, and what I really get at, because yeah, it makes me horny. It does. He did such a good job, and you know these traditional, fertility goddess evocations, and even showing a thin woman, right? A thinner woman, different body types. It's such a pleasure to look at. The bather. I like, I'm drawn to women in general, but I have preference for redheads, if I have the choice, you know. And this is, of course, the bather. In 1881, Renoir, aged 40, took his wife on their honeymoon to Rome and Naples. Mme. Renoir posed for this portrait painted at Sorrento towards the end of the year. Before this, the artist had done few paintings of nudes, and those had been solidly influenced by Courbet and executed in poses like these of ancient Greek sculptures. It was several years later before Renoir would duplicate the translucence and delicacy of color and touch he achieved in this painting. The model's pink and white skin gleams with a pearly brilliance. A few bluish shadows enhance the pure flesh tones. The model's honey-colored hair is silhouetted against the intense Mediterranean blue of the background. Her shining dark eyes and childish mouth are innocent. In her pose, she suggests the modest simplicity of the Renaissance Venuses Renoir studied and admired. Through the overall composition, though the overall composition is less formal, and the proportions of the figure are more ample. In this original work, Renoir had intuitively condensed the entire European tradition of rendering nudes as derived from the ancients. Vase of chrysanthemums. This is a lot like Van Gogh, you know, with the sunflowers. It's a bit of comedy in this one. The Seated Bather in 1914, right? Is not an exact representation. She's just happy to be there. Yeah, you know, there's a lot of art that doesn't care about proportion or exactness. That you know, again, art, culture, and trends. We go in cycles. We are inspired by the past, and we take from our life experiences, and we create something else in a new version. And this is why I'm burnt out on all of this 3D computer generated imagery, and you know, it's overwhelming. It's not believable anymore. It's too good. It doesn't have the film grain. It doesn't have the it doesn't establish an illusion anymore to me. You know, this window into another world through a filter, because it's so clear and so sharp. That it's I don't know, it's queasy, it's uneasy, it's the uncanny valley. The resolution is too high, you know, so on and so forth. Or perhaps I just come from another era, and I should be thrown away like yesterday's newspaper. Anyways, I'm not going to go into any more of this. After an hour of talking, I'm tired of this, and Anyways, thanks for listening and to me just read a book. Yep. Again, I'm just staring at Phantasmagoria, which is, again, I used to call it Space is Not Empty, but Phantasmagoria, or however you pronounce it, spooky orgasm. Yeah. Renoir. Something real, something visceral, something authentic. Take care of yourself.